everyone. This is James Donlan with American Mime Radio. And yes, that is not Karen Hoyer next to me over there. That is Keith Berger. And if you'll remember, we interviewed the Chameleons, Keith Berger and Sharon Diskin, a few months ago. And Keith has been very, very good to want to come back on to be a co-host, because we're going to be talking today to two guests that represent the American Mime Theater, one of the USA's most prolific mime companies, one of the first mime companies, with Paul J. Curtis as the founder and artistic director. And Keith was trained there and back in the 70s. And he owes a lot to that group in terms of the philosophy and so forth. So Keith, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me, James.
Yeah. Let me introduce Mike Diaz, who's out there behind the black curtain. He's the guy. He just drove back from Florida today with 2 dogs, or maybe 1 dog, but he's back there scratching at this point. And he's the guy that pulls the buttons and does the levers and makes this all happen. And he can shut us off at any time. Okay. So Mike, wherever you are, thank you from the bottom of my heart. So Keith, let's talk a little bit about American Mime Theater before we introduce our guests.
Sure. The American Mime Theater is a totally unique form and style of mime. It was founded by Paul J. Curtis in, I believe, 1952, the year I was born. Paul studied with a famous director called Erwin Piscator. And he also studied in Paris and had great arguments with Etienne Ducreux, and decided to start his own style of mime that was really rooted in method acting. And so movement and method acting put together, and a kind of really percussive style of movement at that. Style that's intention, or what he called form, and yet motivated with emotions and real, no fake stuff, no white face, nothing like that.
The name American Mime Theater, isn't there a story about how that came to be?
That came to be because Jean-Louis Barrault came to watch Paul and his performers in a studio, and Jean-Louis Barrault said, well, this isn't any mime that I know, this is American mime. And so that's how the name American Mime came into being. Yeah.
Fantastic. And who are we going to interview today?
We're going to interview Mark Maislin and Erica Sarrazin Barillo. And I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I knew her as Erica Sarrazin before she married, and it became Erica Sarrazin Barillo. And can I tell you why I picked these two out of all the people that
you certainly can.
I could have chosen several different people, and I hope they're not mad at me for not choosing them. But there's something about Erica and Mark, and I think here's a conversation I had with Paul that sums this up. We were getting kind of drunk one night together, and I don't quite remember how the subject of Mark and Erica came up. I think I was pointing out something one of them did, and he turned to me, he said, you see, Keith, Mark and Erica are two people who I would call luminous. I said, what? And I remember getting this twinge of jealousy, because Paul always would refer to me as a dark cloud rolling into the room. So kind of the opposite of the way he described Mark and Erica, but luminous. And he said they have the ability to just light up the room. And I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly right. They do. more than just about anyone, the two of them have this amazing light. And I used to just love to watch both of them in their own way. You know, Erica used to have these, like on the studio floor, would have these beautiful lines that she would create and these beautiful characters. And it was just really compelling. And Mark had this energy that was like, you just lean forward and watch this guy, you know? And so I've always sort of thought of, you know, they're nothing alike exactly, but I've always thought of them together to have this special light. The other reason I chose them is they're examples of people who went on from American Mime to do other things in the theater and do them well, you know. So that's my reasoning. Do you want me to read their
when you're talking about this luminous period, which what years were those when you guys were all training in New York?
You know, we kind of crisscrossed with each other over, I want to say 10 years, in and out of the Mime Theater, you know, and you would always see them and they would always see me, or, you know, I mean, if I wasn't there, they were there, but then I came and then one of them left, and we just crisscrossed each other over the years.
So this was like the early 70s, late 60s, 70s.
I would say early 70s to the late 70s. That's my recollection.
Yeah. Read something about them, about what they're doing now and where they've come from. Okay. Yeah.
So as a child, Erica Sarazin-Barillo was enraptured by the beauty of the ocean and the lush surroundings of the East Coast, where she grew up. Her mother was an artist, and she says, I was gifted from the start with a ready-made muse. Her career began as an actress and singer, and as a member of the American Mime Theater. She writes, what I learned under the mentorship of Paul J. Curtis was invaluable. It set me on the path of a Renaissance life that led to acting, circus arts, jewelry making, painting, costume design, and writing. Throughout her career, it has been her mission to make a connection soul to soul, whether it be through visual or verbal means.
Great.
That's Erica. Our second guest, Mark Maislin, has been an active mime actor, writer, and director for over 50 years. He abandoned his pre-med studies to dance in New York City with such notables as Martha Graham, Robert Joffrey, Alvin Nicolai, Lynn Simonson, and others. When he was exposed to American Mime in 1970, he fell in love with this art form that fused acting and movement, storytelling without words. It put before him a path of playwriting that enabled him to focus on both the technical and creative aspects of art. After a career of performing and numerous college teaching engagements, he settled out west, where he has devoted the past 2 decades to his company, New Vision Arts, where he is director, designer, and teacher. Please welcome our guests, Erica and Mark.
And there we are. Erica and Mark will appear.
Et voila.
Oh boy, oh boy. Keith,
Wow.
that was a gift. It was a gift
you.
to hear these words from you.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and I just want to say something that came up for me as you were saying luminosity, that you saw that within us.
Yeah.
I remember you one day doing an exercise where you had to speak the line, the freedom line that you were feeling at the moment. And this is going to sound silly, but I related to you so much. And I want to tell you the way in which it was that I related to you. You said, I am so sappy. I am so sentimental. And I feel that perhaps some of the luminosity that you saw in me has to do with being a bit of a romantic, which I think most artists actually are.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, you
I didn't know
touched my
that.
heart.
Look, I didn't know that.
Yes,
You're gonna make me cry.
yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Mark. The first question, and Erica, you can answer this too.
Okay.
So, based on your bios, you've done so many things, and possibly a lot of this was inspired by the American Mime Theater experience, and that's why you're here. And I wanted to ask Mark, because I know you've written plays and you've performed, and we'll talk about teaching. I don't know if either one of you teach, but that's later in the conversation. So the moment right before you go on stage or you're going to do a presentation, I'm talking about the split second, whether you peek it through the curtains or not, that moment right before you go on stage, what's going on with you at that point in your head or otherwise?
That's a very interesting question. I'm surprised actually by that question. And it's actually pretty vital in that almost the same thing happens every single time. And other performers, I'm sure, have the same thing, where there is this fear of not being worthy of being out there, forgetting lines, miscuing, dropping a prop, whatever that, all that rushes through like a moment before death, so to speak. And what's really funny is that, it's not funny because it's something that I teach and something that I learned at the Mime Theater as well, is being able to say, I'm afraid, and breathe it and breathe out, and let that fear actually occur, not deny it, and be able to look at it and say, kind of abstractly, really, not that, now I'm really not afraid, but being able to be vulnerable to that and then be open totally and step through the curtain right at that moment, stepping onto the stage for the first entrance.
It's like Into the Breach, right? I mean, it's like some kind of mystical courage suddenly is upon you to be able to make that step, right?
That's exactly right. It is that. I think that's a great Shakespearean connection there for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Erica? What goes through your head? That split second.
That's right. I mean, there's always that terror that you burst through. But I think that the fear, the anxiety is actually, if channeled well, is your charisma. Mm-hmm. You're utilizing your energies in such a way that they become transformative. Mm-hmm. And suddenly on the stage, and you are living the role. So that fear goes away very, very quickly. And if it doesn't, boy, you're in trouble, and so is the audience. But and that's quite something. I think that anxiety has its place for us as human beings in life as well. If we utilize that energy properly, why then we're able to transform into something better, something bigger.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said when you're playing the role, whatever that role is, whether it's abstract movement or a character, it's like the fear goes away. Yeah, it's like you go to another place where you kind of invite the uncertainty, right? You invite the uncertainty of what's to come, because you can handle it, or it's fun handling it.
You know what they say? They actually say that the realest moment on stage is when you're just about to lose your lines, when you're going up.
I believe that.
True.
That's a great, in classic clowning, that's the, how to make something out of the fault, like that's the same kind of concept,
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, and this is what Paul taught us all. I do my damnedest to remain in a creative state, and all that means.
Right.
A creative state connected to the creative unconscious. It's and to include the audience in that bubble that is the creative unconscious.
Yeah.
And I think when you study with the Mime Theater over a period of time, you learn to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability the audience feels, they empathize with that. And you don't even know this is happening to you. That's one of the things I loved about the American Mime Theater is you you started to get this vulnerability and you didn't care. It's just like, that's a natural way to be. And the audience can feel you. And that was, yeah.
Mm.
I totally agree. And it's so interesting on both of those points. I feel that I have a book coming out next year about creativity. And Erica, you really touched upon this, and it's tremendously vital for the American Mime Theater, is that you're setting a groundwork and you're habituating a particular groundwork to enable yourself to be in a position to essentially be a vessel for pure thought, for pure inspiration, for pure spirituality, for pure emotion, whatever that may be, without a barrier. And it's all about that idea that's not an idea, that the universe is intrinsically creative. It's changing from second to second. And I think that Paul instilled just what Keith said, is that at these points where, in a way, we're taught when we're young, oh, you don't want to be vulnerable. That's how you get hurt. No, you don't want to do that. And it just reaffirms the armoring process. And at the American Mime Theater, and in some of my memories in terms of, what I would call intimacy, learning intimacy, just what Keith said, and as Paul would even indicate, being personal, is that once you are vulnerable, you realize, or I realized, I became invulnerable. It was so huge and so empowering and so gifting and sharing. And as Keith indicated as well, it's what the audience feels. And when I work with actors, it's really coming down to that truth on that stage, in that scene, is that moment of sharing. That's what the audience, that's why they cry. That's why they laugh. So yeah,
it's interesting that when you think of mime, there's a stylism there, or an abstraction in dance and mime, like in the powerful forms of mime. And it's so interesting that through this stylistic approach, that a truth evolves that's so deep that you're talking about, through form and time and space, which is the chrysalis of dance and mime. I would say they used to call me a mime dancer, and I don't know, I wasn't really a dancer. I couldn't remember. I couldn't count to myself. But anyway, but I'm just saying that this sense of form, that this authentic truth comes through. That's such a beautiful part of the art form,
Yeah,
definitely. And American Mime in particular, it is designated as an indigenous American art form. And there's a reason for that, because it does have a technique that enables you to achieve certain quality in it. But it also has its own look, and this thing of punctuation, and Keith just said earlier, this thing of this degree of tension. What actually is that? I always looked at that as punctuation. When I'm saying a sentence, I'm going high here, I'm putting a question mark at the end, I'm speeding up through it over here. What is that? That's all the phrasing that goes on as this actor that's not saying words. Hello?
Well, isn't there a template, like Keith and Sharon showed me this document that I'd never seen before, of that Paul Curtis had put together, of the kind of the approach of the teachings with illustrations and concepts, and this, which was the American Mime Theater technique, and even down to how to warm up, I guess, right, Keith? Doesn't that document show that?
Yeah.
It loosely does that. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, there were a couple books that they did. The first book I thought was the best. It was that thin book, remember, in the early 70s? I thought that was the best. Then they made this whole notebook, and I just thought it was way too much. That thin book, we had to memorize. Remember, we had to memorize word for word the thin. Were you in the?
Absolutely, I was in that crazy time period too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I still refer to those books.
Yeah.
I mean, surely what he had to teach was invaluable.
Yeah.
And there were so many aspects to, not just physical technique.
Oh no.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Here's the next question. So you made that leap into the breach, around the corner, and you're in the light, or in the environment that's created. what does the audience represent to you? Like where, like maybe the American Mime Theater experience started to formulate that concept of the other, or, and how is it with you, or whatever? Like what, I don't mean like, are they kids or the adults? I mean, what, as a body of organisms, what does that audience represent to you? Like, and how would one approach that? You understand what I'm
Well,
saying?
what comes to my mind is that art in general is communication.
Okay.
And he used to say it just this way: art is the communication of spirituality through symbols. Well, you were communicating to the audience, and there are a few different circles. The first circle is between you and your fellow actor, and then you include your audience.
Mm-hmm.
They are the witnesses, but they are very much a part of the act, of the creative act in the moment.
And I think that Curtis also, he always had auditors. Like when you came and you saw that class,
Yeah.
you were an auditor for that class, James.
Right.
And
Right.
he always wanted people to come and do that. And I think subtly behind his growth and life, certainly from the time he spent in Europe and having a very, as we all had, even in those days, a very great Brechtian influence of how does an audience in reality exist. And part of this auditorness was a way of enabling us as students and then performers to incorporate that as part of this sort of this, meta universe. It wasn't just us in isolation on a stage. At all times, they were always there. You never forgot, I'm going to say them, but you never forgot them as part of us. It's a really interesting fine line that you bring up.
Yeah, that's where it takes it. It's not so much therapy anymore, but it's a more complete, pot of the world's energy, in a sense,
yeah.
because as we all know, theater training and acting classes and can approach, this concept of kind of, it's about me therapy, almost like self-help, right?
Yeah.
But yet this idea you're mentioning of the witness is always there. So that brings it into the range of this communication. And Erica's talking about it, and this idea of, a performance, in much more than just a self-centered thing. So
Can I change the subject just a little bit?
absolutely.
And this is a question that has nagged me for years. I have this question. And it's funny because I've never gotten a really straight answer. People just say, "Well, that's that." Don't think about it. But over the years, I have noticed taking classes and teaching classes that in the class there are sometimes these moments which are just completely mind-blowing. I mean, nobody's ever seen this, and nobody will ever see this.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And it disappears. It's ephemeral. And to me, it's heartbreaking. And you can't go and go, do you remember when that, I mean, you can, but people go, yeah. It's like, no, that disappeared. But for me, it doesn't disappear. Maybe I just have I'm an anomaly or something, but I remember this stuff, and I don't remember a lot, but I remember this stuff, And so I have to admit, I asked, because I'm so curious about this. I asked Mark and Erica, do you remember any moments? I emailed them, I think last night. Do you remember any moments that stand out to you that were like that? Can you think?
By the way, I didn't get that email. I didn't. No, but I'll think. Mark, why don't you go first?
I was really glad there was two of us so that you could go first.
I'll give you one.
I do remember. Well, of course, I remember so much. I mean, the American Mime Theater in general for well over 10 years stays with me, but I have a memory that goes way back.
Right.
What I was going to say was when I was preparing to do The Lovers,
Right.
it was the hardest thing in the world. This was a piece that you practically have to be a contortionist.
Have you seen
I had Stretch, the female in The Lovers, right? I had tremendous stretch.
Yeah.
But I had no strength whatsoever. None. Terrible. And Paul was at me throughout the rehearsal process and finally said to me, I'm going to take this role away from you. If you don't go, you can do this. You've got it within you to do this. And I actually went to a hypnotist. And literally, now it's a 13-minute piece. And I remember in time being hypnotized. Now hypnotism, you're partially awake. It's a very strange place to be mentally.
Yeah, it scared me.
Oh, it was fascinating. So I went through it in my mind and I got the principle of what it was all about. So because of my lack of strength, when I would do this piece, my body would shake like this. I couldn't get it until I went through the hypnotic process. And what I discovered was remarkable, and it has stayed with me as a principle through my whole life. And let me see the words. The words, it was a combination of two energies, relaxation and control combined together. It was a remarkable principle. And the next time I went to rehearsal, like that, it was like I was floating, and I will never forget what it felt like every single time to do that 13-minute play. I am so dehydrated, excuse me.
Okay. But you were able to repeat it. It didn't disappear.
It did not disappear.
Right.
No, I mean, for me, the whole point of just about everything this man taught me and, dedicated himself to teaching every student practitioner was that they really begin to understand how to tap into their instrument so that it can be repeated many times over.
It's a big difference.
Do you think Paul's some of his goals would have been not just to influence new minds, but to also develop amazing actors? I guess it's,
you bet.
I mean, a good mime has to be a good actor. We all know that, but I mean, it seems like it goes almost beyond the mime, into another place.
I do believe that Paul was dedicated to teaching people how to be creative human beings.
Yes.
And how to be artists of all sorts. I'm convinced.
Yes.
And he felt deeply, he was dedicated. I mean, he wanted to turn people into masters. And I think that he achieved that with many people.
Tell us a little bit, both of you, maybe Mark, you can start, like what your influences were, like where you grew up, where you came to do this work, and then where you've, briefly we got a lot more to talk about, where you've come, like we're talking about, Erica just mentioned developing artists in general, but tell us a little bit about your influences, like the environment that built you,
Okay, I will, but I'd like to answer Keith's question first. Because, like Erica, it's spread over so many aspects of what American Mime was about. And understand, there was a teaching format and there was a performance part as part of this art form. And I don't think that Paul was particularly committed to this performance aspect. He liked to create some plays, but he wasn't really committed. And he never went about actually having an administrator that was totally, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, and I'm going out and I'm selling this and we're going to perform. He was not able to have that in his particular circle. He definitely could have, but he didn't. So you go back to the teaching aspect, which is more what Eric and I are even talking about now. Although I was there for creation of a number of the plays, and but to answer Keith, because there really are a lot of these elements and examples. But coming back to this thing of intimacy, because I think as a performer and as an actor, and certainly there's big holes in dance when I see dance, but it's more in acting, is this thing of being personal and intimate. And the thing that comes from me is I would give these class freedoms, and to let you, whoever's watching, we'd come together in a circle and everybody would say something in 6 words or less that would not just be revealing of self, but would bring you closer to the group. Oh, it sounds easy. Oh, I'll just say blah, 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 blah. This is so hard. It took me, I think it probably took me at least 3 years for me to give my very first class freedom. That was real.
Yeah.
I know that sounds stupid because I go home and work on classes. No, that was part of what was going on, where Paul Curtis was of the old school, where he berated you. He didn't hit you physically, but he basically hit you to break through your armoring, to get through the shell, to get to the core of you, just like Erica says, in terms of this thing of a greater spirituality of which we all emanate from. He was committed to this, and he was old school. You can't do that stuff anymore. They'll report you these days for that kind of behavior. It was okay then. Coming back to this, so my example to you, Keith, is, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said in 6 words or less something that was tremendously personal, and it did connect to the group. I shared with the group, truly. I will never forget the feeling, ever. It set the template for the rest of my life of what it was I was truly after in terms of communication, community, acting. It just encompassed the whole thing. So that's my primary example to you of the question, to answer your question, Keith, was that class freedom. Yeah.
Can I tell you one? I remember things so clearly of both of you. You know, as I was saying with Eric, I remember this. You know, he had this thing called interplay, and 2 characters would have a brief encounter, and it would be an improvisation. And Erica and Mark were just marvelous to watch, you know, and I have these memories of them. But earlier than that, you know, we did the exercise you were talking about, James, where you were characterizing it as on and off. That's not quite it. But
I'm just talking about the orders that he was giving.
Yeah. It's called moving to words. And I didn't really completely get it till this moment where D. Kavanaugh, do you remember D. Kavanaugh? Did this, it came out of nowhere. It was a thing where Paul would say, okay, relate to no one, or relate to the audience, or relate to me. And if you were relating to him, that was really tough, because he was just stare at you like this. And he was vulnerable, but if you lost him, it was like losing a baby's attention, you know.
Was he smoking a cigarette ever or anything like that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he'd be watching you, and it's like he used to say, you know, pretend I'm a cat, you know, you have to keep my attention. Good luck. But so Dida comes in and he gets his attention, and then she does this whole thing, and to me it was timeless. It might have lasted a couple minutes, but even that is a long time for that exercise, you know. But she did this whole communication, this abstract communication with these feelings going back and forth between them. And I said, okay, this is it. This is the true meaning of this art form. She wasn't doing anything specifically, you know, like no narrative elements, no literal things. It was all gesture, but abstract, but real feelings, and not just real feelings, but she was literally sharing them with Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul was responding. And then when it was over, it was like, did you see that? Did you? And the class just went on, and I just thought, fuck, that was just breathtaking, you know. I don't know, stuff
Yeah.
like that would happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And you would realize what the whole thing was about.
So what creates that? I had in all my years of teaching, I saw a guy fly once. I saw he flew. One of my students flew. He flew. He flew 3 feet off the floor for about 15 feet. He's like Superman.
Oh.
So what do you think creates that energy? That what is it? Trust or what creates this thing in you? This moment, the moment that happens that the bigger public will never see.
Yeah. The bigger.
What is that? What's conducive? Is that a trance state? I mean, I always felt as a teacher, you had to trance the students. I'm going to trance you, and they buy into it. So
I think maybe not so much trance, but it is engendered by ritual,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes.
Ritual creates trance. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a repetition of certain deep things going on. Yeah.
I don't think that it's trance, which has almost a sense of detachment.
That's right.
Almost by nature. But I think that this has to do with that almost all the exercises, especially this one of moving to words, where the word becomes this impulse, is that it's trying, always going to the core impulse, not translated. It's the core impulse.
Mhm.
And when
It's not literal. It's not, you don't literally interpret the word. Yeah.
No. It's an energetic source, but you need to be in touch with what that source is. It's triggering something. And it's your job as the artist, forget about American Mime, as the artist, to actually step into whatever that core is and experience it. And that's where so much of whether it's fear or the unknown, makes it, at least for me, so compellingly wonderful. That's part of the drive, at least for me, is stepping over the edge. I look as the artist is standing at the edge of the planet, leaning over.
Yeah, comfort and free fall.
Live, So
yeah.
Do you think the environment needs to have a simple palette? You know what I mean? I mean, today's world is so complex. Yet all points of history have been complex, but it seems for this moment to happen, there has to be less interference or less challenges to establish that. I'm wondering if these moments we're talking about could have happened in a simpler time, some ways, especially with a young mind.
I think they can still happen.
Sure.
I think you're really talking about crystallized focus of all your energies mentally. I mean, the performing arts, I think, are very much about focus and connection to the all that is.
Right.
Grounded and transcendent. And if you heighten it, if you learn how to plug into your instrument and heighten all those aspects of who you are, you can fly. I actually saw somebody levitate once before my eyes. It's remarkable what the human being can do. Well, obviously, you know that. We all kind of know that, don't we? It's remarkable.
I believe that students or teachers are only as good as their students. Do you feel that you guys had a hand in creating this energy? You know what I'm saying? Like, some people compliment the teacher, but in my 50 years of teaching on all different levels, I'm saying you're only as good a teacher as your students. So I'm thinking that you guys had a lot to do with the environment, not just Paul J. Curtis's approach. That's just my thought. So
I think that's right. I don't think me so much, but Mark and Erica more. I really do. I have to say, I felt a lot of times like, and I loved being there, and Paul and I were great friends, but this is another reason I chose you two, because you really did, to me, make up the mime theater, just what James is saying. There was, I don't know, this energy. What the mime theater, I can't really put it into words,
Listen, I remember, now this is very lovely of you to say, what I remember of those classes was this strange guru of a teacher, and he was a kind of guru.
Yeah. Yeah.
For somebody who wasn't, terribly social in the world,
Yeah.
he understood so much about the human condition that an entire classroom would be leaning forward.
Yeah.
So talk about connection. The connection between teacher and mass of students was remarkable.
Yeah.
Everybody in that room, every single time. Nobody was idly looking and falling asleep or yawning. Again, what an interesting bubble, an energetic bubble between teacher and students.
So let's talk about, so instead of talking about that place for a while, because if we take the premise that the place is only as good as who, or is only what the participants are, let's talk about you guys a little bit, because that, this is your experience with American Mime Theater is just one step in your evolvement as artists, right? So even though it was a very important part. So let's get back to this, like, influences and maybe where you guys came from. Who wants to jump in there? I think our viewers would be curious what formed you to be able to take on this experience at the American Mime Theater, and then how that empowered you later. So what do you think? Who's first? Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that our history is obviously very critical to that makes up who we are.
Sure.
And you inferred a little bit a while ago that as actors and therapy, you would use those in the same sentence. And truth be said, acting exercises have become a very integral part of therapy, of psychotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the other way around. Actors didn't take it from the therapists. The therapists stole it from acting exercises and stuff like that.
Good point.
And a big part of that is history. Building a character is history making. And so, and what does that entail? So now to go back to real history. So, here I am, I'm kind of an athlete, and, I'm on my tennis team, and I'm on this pre-med track, and, I'm this, smart guy, right?
This is in Queens. This is in Queens,
right? This is where I grew up, exactly, in New York City. But along the way, when I was younger, maybe 6 or 8 or something, my mother, who was much more artistically bent than my dad, she appreciated stuff, and she dabbled in a little bit of painting, but she wasn't an artist. She took the family, and my dad went reluctantly, to see the very first time from Russia this group called the Bolshoi Ballet.
Wow.
Into New York City. I will never forget it. This influenced my entire life. I'll never forget, I think it was Maya Pliskaya, leaping across the stage, and I knew in that moment exactly what I wanted to be.
Interesting.
I asked my parents, out of that, I said, I want to take dance classes. I want to do this. And they, of course, went, you're crazy. You are not ever doing this. You're going to be a doctor. That's what's happening. And then I went to college, and I was pre-med, and this woman who I knew said, dude, you got to come to this class. I'm taking this class. What class? It's a dance class. And I danced all through high school. I would take a bus to churches and do dances in other places. I love to dance. And I took a dance class, a formal dance class with Billy Kirpich, amazingly wonderful woman. And I knew what I wanted to do. And I dropped out of school, dropped out of pre-med, came to New York and started doing dance. And as things unfolded, I was doing dance in these various places that Keith mentioned. And I got turned on to the American Mime. I audited a class and went, oh my God, this is astounding. And then shortly after that, they had a performance, and I saw a performance, and in that performance was The Lovers. And I think Paul, and I think it was Anita Morris was still performing at that time. It might have been Nina Petrocelli, but I think it was Anita Morris. And I sat in that audience and I went, I want that role. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I did get that role. And Paul aged, and he needed a younger person. And I was at the Mime Theater, and I got that role. So historically, and all these other things, also feed in from a spiritual awakening and finding that, this aspecting of all that is truly an identification of who am I. which I'm still inquiring, of course, who am I? And an art is a vehicle for this. And what better art than this silent form? I couldn't believe it was just phenomenal to be able to write plays that had no words. People, through physical activities, developed relationships and stories that were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I've done stuff on the street and I've done individual stuff as well, as many of us have. This was theatrically huge. It was almost like opera in essentially in the scale of it. And I think on some level, Curtis was a little bit afraid of that scale as times changed. And so it didn't expand into the awakening that humanity is going through. And that's why the teaching itself is so important, as opposed to the performance aspect of it, which has its own limitations now. But that was, I hope that's kind of a reasonable historical something.
Yeah, we'll get into what you're doing now a little later. But how about you, Erica? What was your beginnings as an artist?
Well, Paul used to say this. I'm just going to use these words. He used to say it to me all the time. He said, Erica, you fell out of the womb a baby artist. So I mean, I know that was true. And I was unconscious of it when I was a little girl. I just did it, but I was plugged in. And I think initially I was maybe plugged in spiritually, plugged into the creative unconscious with this huge passion and imagination. And one thing led to the next, but I will tell you this, what really opened me up and the muse who took my hand into the arts really kind of came from my fate and destiny and not pleasant things. The arts saved my life. I had a very difficult childhood. A lot of divorce, alcoholism, death. My mother died when I was quite young. And I was separated from my family. I was a very quiet child, observing everything. And I really think that my bliss and all of the things that caught me led me to the American Mime Theater for sure. But I felt that philosophers that I read about, psychologists, etc., they were more family and more grounding than my life. So, if I may, I'm going to read something. This is a book that I spent 2.5 years writing. This is my book called Chasing Radiance, of all things. When you said luminosity, I thought, isn't that interesting?
Chasing what?
Radiance.
Radiance.
Just the beginning, because the first thing that I knew about when I was a kid, the first talent was singing. And I almost went into opera. I wasn't quite certain which way I was going to go. Now, let me read this and you'll see. Went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. That's where I met Paul Curtis. He was teaching there. I remember what originally attracted me to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts was actually their program cover. It seemed ever so much more artful, and it appealed to me for reasons that I can't say I understood back then. But I had already been making most of my choices out of instinct. As I said before, I might have made a career of singing, but it was the artwork on the program of the American Academy that clinched the deal. It was a photo of 3 figures posed together in a most intriguing composition, the lovers. They were all in masks and black unitards. God, I am so dehydrated. It reminded me of something. Now, this is interesting what it reminded me of. I couldn't quite pinpoint what, but the impression was strong. What that photo had to do with acting, I could not imagine. What it had to do with the Academy, I couldn't fathom. Yet, in a way, it called to me. And so I followed. I will just tell you. It was a picture of the lovers. And the figures in black unitards in these abstract positions actually reminded me of a painting that my mother did. She was an artist of Cubism. And I have that painting upstairs. And when I started learning metaphysics, I did a meditation. And what came to me was that the figure of that painting in motion, moving like this amazing, just liquid flow. It was an incredible metaphor. And I remember when I came out of the meditation, I was with a group, I said, that image is my soul. When I saw lovers, when I saw that picture, I just felt I'm drawn to this, not to singing, although singing is God. It is. Art is God, but this was my soul speaking to me. So that's kind of what led me to the American Academy and what eventually led me to Paul.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's many, in both of your, with both of you, I have a lot of parallels in my background with both of you, actually. It's very interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. We'll talk another time, but there's a lot of parallels, which is very interesting. It makes you think if most artists come out of a certain place.
Isn't that interesting?
Wait, I hear some music. Oh, yes, I hear some music. It's time to open the gift, and I'll take a drink of my wine. Okay.
I got to tell you, if I don't get some water, I will not
That's
speak
right.
a word.
So, Erica, I think you have a gift that was sent to you in the or an envelope that was sent in the mail. And Mark, you were sent one too, but unfortunately, it's probably lost somewhere in the Oregon forest at this point.
Everything.
So, Erica, open it up and tell us what's
a day or
there.
two later than anybody else. When people send FedEx, I go, no, it doesn't get to me the next day. It gets 2 days later. I live in the woods. I look outside and the deer are right out my window.
Yeah.
Oh, you're lucky.
You don't have more deer than we do in Ashland, though. Deer like cats in Ashland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what you got here. Oh my. Okay.
Read it to us.
I will show it to you first. I don't know. I'm looking at myself in this little box.
Okay.
So. All right. Thank you.
I'll put my glasses on to make sure I can understand if it's right.
Thank you for joining us on the Mime Radio Show. Please accept this gift from the Mime Museum Collection as a token of our thanks. The Mime Museum souvenir 2B902. Description. Item. One of 4 found in broom closet at the American Mime Theater Studio. Unitard returned from Dynasty Dry Cleaners on East 62nd Street. Mark, no change. Item shrunk during dry cleaning. Also labeled Erica.
And I think
Wow.
there might be something in there, right? Keep looking. Yeah. Show us.
It's a laundry ticket. All right.
Really drunk.
So that it was an
Yeah.
original American Mime Theater leotard that was shrunk at the dry cleaners, and we, as I heard, I don't curate the museum, but I heard that we have to get rid of some stuff, and they found that, and they decided to send it. You're getting one of those too, Mark, when it arrives.
Fantastic. Listen, and I want to tell you something about the American Mime, the unitard.
The
Is that-
uniform, yeah.
Yeah, it was specifically a piece of fabric that moved in both directions, so it adhered to you. It was thick. It was absolutely skin tight, and it was much better than just a dance unitard. It didn't pop up and do weird things.
Really, it was different than a typical dance.
Absolutely,
unitard?
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Are you ready?
Who
for
invented
this?
that? Where did that come from?
This came from Paul got turned on to this woman that she she made all of our unitards. We were fitted and they were made, and she sewed them and made them.
Wow.
I don't know how else to describe it.
Wow.
But I will tell you this, which is insane. So we're performing up in Maine, and so I packed my unitard, and before the thing, I'd gone and had it dry cleaned, and off we went up there. And about halfway through the performance, and I'm doing dreams, my unitard is getting loose, just getting loose. I'm going, what the heck is going on? And Jean Barber's off stage, and she has needle and thread, and she's literally grabbing bunches of it and sewing it so it's going to be tight, like a unitard. By the time I got to the end in the bow, you see the bow, and there's clean, 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 and then this guy who has all this flabby kind of uniform on, right? Hello, you could never dry clean the unitard. The chemicals in the dry cleaning eroded the rubber that was holding the whole thing in.
Oh my God.
Yes, and there I was in performance as it slowly unraveled. It was very funny.
That was
actually.
one of my next questions, is disaster stories. When you've fulfilled the check the box right there.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is absolutely, yeah. This is for your late night TV for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I have got to get some water. I will
Go ahead.
right
Go
back.
ahead.
Perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Do you, Mark, tell us about your teaching. Do you teach
I
or
teach
do workshops, or and if not, why not? And like, where does that fit into your mission
yes,
today?
I've been teaching less than I did in the past.
Yeah.
And part of what's going on now is that there is an opportunity for me to teach, younger people. And I think it's just a question right now of motivation, is that I'm doing more writing, so I'm doing less teaching. And the things that were in my credits is that, as I said earlier, early on, I got onto this, not just idea, but what the reality was of creativity. What is this thing called creativity? Because that's the thing that underlines all the great art, really. And it's not being a copier of something else, and something that feeds off of something else. But what is that center of that? And that is how I incorporate exercises from the American Mime Theater, how I incorporate whether it's visualizations or even sort of quasi meditations from my spiritual growth. And my teaching has to do with that. So these are workshops that, for example, at Tufts, it was a whole semester. This is what the development was, and people kept journals and they created pieces and did that kind of thing and what I found fascinating, and especially about this thing of teaching, is that this is not limited to people that want to become dancers or actors.
Mm-hmm.
That what I found most fulfilling for me is in this process of creativity and teaching is that people who wanted to be doctors or engineers or biologists or people who were housewives or house husbands, that this aspect was something that was inside of them that they knew existed, but didn't really ever have an outlet for it. And maybe they were too old now to even be a professional dancer, but there was something inside. They knew there was something inside. And that's part of even of spiritual awakening, where you have dreams, something percolates, your heart feels a certain way, but you don't know what it is. And so people gravitate towards teachers that then enable them to discover through their operating what it is. And I think that was also a great thing with Paul, just to complete the loop, is that he forced you to become an independent creative artist. He didn't give you answers. He just never gave you answers.
No.
He put it back to you the way great masters do. They go, you're the master.
Yes.
Stop denying your own godhood, And although Curtis was harsh, and as a teacher, I am not as harsh as he is, which is fine. It's just my style is just not as harsh as that. It has the same end result, in that I want individuals to tap into and become their light.
Yes.
And so that when I teach, I do usually like 4 months at a time, over, like 12 to 16 weeks in that format.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this concept of the teaching artist, like Keith, and Sharon are teaching artists. And
yeah,
to me, it seems
That's
one of
great.
the missions or one of the responsibilities of an artist is to, at some point, communicate to others, not just other, pre-professionals, but people just to develop the human being through. I mean, that's the whole purpose of art in our world, I would think,
yes, is the
What about you,
illumination.
Erica? What's your
Yeah,
feeling about
absolutely.
teaching? Do you,
Oh,
do you, do you ever work in that era, or what am I trying to say? Work
Area.
in that
Area, yes.
area or that
Yeah,
arena?
well, actually, for a while when I moved out to Denver, I was teaching at one of the universities, the MFA program out there. And I did teach some American Mime, but I let them, I told them what I was offering. They didn't want a full curriculum. Mostly what they wanted was interplay and characterization, which is very much a backdrop. It's like a wallpaper in my life. Interplay and characterization, that I took further into acting. And look at my face. If I'm to get a role based on what I look like, there aren't going to be too many. So people like us, we become character people, true character actors. And that all started with Paul, for sure. So I taught it at college. Characterization is not taught in this country. I think it's taught in England, but no, Paul's the only one I really know that does it. Past that kind of teaching, I actually got involved with something very early on and facilitated several groups of the book, The Artist's Way. Are you familiar with Julia Cameron's Artist's Way?
Yeah.
That was another extraordinary mentorship. I've done it so many times. And every single time I went through, as a matter of fact, I'm working with another Artist's Way group right now. Every single time I did it, I became a different kind of an artist. I became a painter one time around. I became a potter one time around. When I first arrived here in Denver, I had a tiny baby, but I very quickly was missing acting, performing, and the Artist's Way helped me out on that. So I facilitated several groups and, with a great love of teaching creativity as well.
Yeah.
So I am an artist, and I am a healing artist. Because finally I put it all together. A Renaissance person doesn't mean that you're a jack of all trades merely. Everything sort of bleeds into the next.
Yeah, it means that the puzzle, how it fits together. That's Renaissance.
That's
you
right.
got, some people would say that maybe the American Mime Theater training is rigid, or there's a structure that's difficult to understand, or of course, people have said that about dance training, blah blah blah. I'm just wondering this is a question for all three of you, like what, from the outside of someone looking in at the American Mime Theater, they might say, oh, the structure is too unforgiving. But how do you guys feel about that? Or how should one look at that kind of training? Because you could say that about most things, that like an athlete who's learning how to hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball has to stand in there and train, like you could say that about most things that are worthwhile knowing.
Well, if you can attain absolute freedom through true structure, then you're expanding.
Sure.
With a kind of freedom that is remarkable. You need the structure.
Yeah.
You must have the structure if you want to be a master at something.
Right.
And that's what he was all about. So
So you would give this advice to a young person that is interested in the arts, is this what you just said, right, Erica?
I would clue them into that very fact that structure does not mean a tightness. In fact, quite possibly, it means true freedom. It can teach you to true freedom.
Well, it also would teach subtlety at the same time. I mean, if you have a structure, you're going to get at very mystical and very difficult concepts to understand, because you can only get there by climbing the cliff with technique in a way, you know.
Yes, and I what is that? I think that all art begins with chaos, and it's entering into the chaos and creating form that makes it art. So you need chaos and structure somehow.
Yeah.
You know, to make your mud pie, as Paul would say.
Yeah. No, that's very well put, and that is the paradox, and it's a great one to run that line along. And something that Paul also taught in different ways was all movement comes from non-movement, from stillness.
Yes, exactly.
And so as certainly as mimes, we understand that, and the power of that. That's hard. That's hard to step into that and actually embrace that. And I know just in I'll call them commercial gigs where I've been a statue, essentially. Not even essentially, I was. For a really long time, I learned how to not blink, period. People were stunned. Why? Non-movement. But if we extrapolate this into American Mime and what the simplicity, getting to the core, and again, what is that place of non-movement produces movement?
Right.
That just like, Erica, what you were saying, that's this mix of the structure and the chaos.
Yeah.
Because it comes from the simplicity, but the simplicity is, there's no such thing. It's all chaos. But how do you order that? Well, those are the choices that an artist makes.
Yes, that is the function of the artist.
Yeah.
To enter into the land of soul and spirit and chaos. And
how does a young artist, what advice can you give to a young artist on how to get through those moments, those blocks, those moments of, it all seems chaos, but then how do they punch through that to find the order in the chaos? Like what kind of tips can you give somebody that's listening to this, that's younger? Like, how does one persevere? How does one find that form?
Well,
I guess my first question was, how does one not get discouraged? Yeah.
First of all, if I may just say, you gotta love process.
Yes, I was in love.
You have to love it. You have to love the frustration. You have to love the anxiety. You have to love the ability to fail. And that is the biggest lesson of all for any teaching process. You've got to embrace all of that, knowing that this is not negative. Who came up with this word negative? No. It's all part of this big shabam called life and the arts.
Being fearless in that process.
Yes.
You gotta love
the first thing.
Yeah, if you don't love it, I have kids, and one of them is an artist, and said to everyone, you really have to love this. I know, I mean it. But anything you do in life, I want you are living your life. Whether one son is a physicist, that's great. Another guy is a real estate developer, that's great. They love what they do.
Yeah,
they love what they do. So
I feel the cloud coming around Keith's, the dark cloud. There's something that wants to come out of that.
Yes,
that
let him talk
up there.
This man has stuff to say.
Talk to us.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I picked Erica and Mark. I'm a little different. The only way, and I always admired them for this very attitude. And I think young people should listen to them, not so much me. But because I do.
That's advice in itself. You just said
I can't. I can't do anything else. I've never been able to do anything else but what I do,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know. So, but the cost, I'll tell you, studying at the Mime Theater, and Paul and I were great friends, but there were times where I wasn't just a dark cloud, it was a dark cloud. I mean, I would go out of there feeling so diminished,
Oh dear. Yeah.
and so dragged down. There were times like that, and some of them stretched on for months.
Wow.
Now I kept going, because I knew I had to, but
Who
it,
told you had to?
it's something in me,
Yeah.
I just had to, and it wasn't because I was a slave or anything, but I think you have to accept that darkness as an artist, that you have to accept that darkness.
Yes.
And it isn't all just love. It just isn't, there is this, there is this feeling sometimes, which I don't know. I'm sure you both experience this. You're not all positive, but like,
No.
yeah, no. But I mean, profound. I would have feelings of, and I'm not I don't have any depression. I don't, I don't have that affliction, but there was sometimes profound depression after going to class.
Wow.
That I would experience.
With you personally?
Just coming out of the ethos of the class. And even when I did reasonably well, there was just sometimes this negativity. And I think that outside people did respond to that a bit, that what's he doing, but I really felt, I don't know. Did you ever feel that way?
He was a toughie. I mean, he was one of
So-
those old masters. If he could have had a whip. He used
Right.
to say, "What do you want me to do? I'm going to hit you like an orangutan till
Yeah.
you get it right." He was tough. And I think personally, I'm just very Jungian. And very Jungian. On one hand, I hold joy and positivity. I mean, I really don't like these terms. I really don't. But I hold lightness of being, and on the other, I hold depth and intensity, and I put them together, and that's just the way I think. So when I say you got to love what is, what I mean is you got to even love the depression. You got to even love a dark night of the soul. That I'm just saying where it's process. It's
love or accept.
It's just a philosophy, and I happen to.
Well,
live by
Erica,
it.
love or accept?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
Embrace. How's that word? Or at least acknowledge when something is working, or if you stick it out, you're going to arrive at something quite magnificent.
Right.
Nothing is black and white. So
Mhm.
we're always navigating where we need to be. And we all have our own way of filtering consciousness. And we all have our own way of feeling into what's going on. But his classes were intense, Keith.
Yeah.
He was intense.
Very much. Very much. They tested your perseverance, no doubt.
Yeah.
And it was not for everybody. Not
That's
for
right.
everybody. People came and went.
This
And
is
people who
true.
were good artists came and went. And they said, "This is not for me," and that's totally understandable.
Was there a moment when you, as they say, cut the umbilical cord? Was there a moment, because both of you have gone on to other things?
Yes.
I mean, was that difficult, or was it you felt prepared that actually this was a launch pad? I mean, was there ever any thought about, oh, I don't know if I have the courage to move beyond these walls, Like, how did you open that door?
It's extremely hard. I mean, this was my mentor. This was a person who I didn't just look up to, but was a battery for me that I fed off of, and he gave me enough that I could grow and really self-realize. And to the point where I walked in, I could see the day when I walked into that office and said, "Paul, I need to talk to you. I need to go out I need to write my own pieces. I have to do that. And he looked at me, said, if I were you, I would do exactly the same thing.
That's amazing.
And I did. I went out and I formed a company. In fact, Keith, you saw a piece that it was.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, very mimetic. I mean, it was very abstract. I started using words in an extremely abstract way, but the form, the movement, and in fact, the co-star was Jean Guinness of
Oh,
Montana.
wow.
Well, she had the skill to be able to do this crazy ass piece.
Yeah.
That was really, really good, by the way. But
Boy.
It was. Yeah.
yeah, it actually was.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
that
almost-
was to answer your question. That was the split, and it was very, very
Yeah.
difficult. Yes.
I was almost going to ask the question, like, how do you define what you did or what you do now? But that, I think that is a little murky. That could get into.
I have a question.
Okay.
If you could go back, would you do anything differently?
Hmm.
If you could go back to the old days when you first started studying mime?
Silence before the storm.
I would probably actually pay attention and actually do more homework in a real way, as opposed to shirking my responsibilities and hemming and hawing and procrastinating.
But maybe you know how to do that now.
Say that again?
Maybe you know how better to do that now.
Yes, no question about it. No
Yeah.
question about it. I mean, I remember Paul saying, you only need to do 5 minutes a day on this.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, 5 minutes a day, right? And I understood ultimately, like in this movie Vision Quest, which was this great movie with Matthew Modine, it's not the action that's happening, right? It's what you do it's not these 5 minutes that you're on the stage. It's what you do in those 5 minutes.
Right.
And that's part of the great study process that he also taught. Checking out what is your greatest lack? What is a hole in what you are doing? And addressing that, finding devices that will solve that problem. And that might take, 8 months to do and to get it, but it takes 5 minutes to execute and rehearse.
Mhm.
It's fascinating. You just got to do a real 5 minutes a day. You don't have to do 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day. So that would be the difference of really understanding that, which of course I was too young to understand. So hello, that's part of the process.
Right.
Erica, how did you discover that it was time for you to move on to the things? Yeah.
Well, I sort of had no choice because I was very pregnant. I was 8 months pregnant. It was time, but I also I had gone to him prior to it all, and said it's a different time in my life. He was very angry with me because I feel almost like I was so unconscious of my timing with him. I had waited and worked and worked and worked and prayed and hoped that one day I would be the leading lady of the American Mime Theater. And he started grooming me for that. And I was convinced, we were both convinced this was now going to happen. And then I fell in love with Paul Perillo.
Mm-hmm.
And life just went like this. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was time to leave. So it was, he was very angry with me, I have to admit. And I regret that, but
you regret what? That he was angry?
I regret that I didn't have better timing with him, that it was an insensitive move, but it was an important.
It's a moment of nature calling in a way.
Well, absolutely.
But you both would agree that your experience with the American Mime Theater and Paul Curtis was very influential in your journeys beyond into this present day. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
It's a foundation of sort. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Paul Curtis was my mentor.
Yeah.
I quote this guy all the time. He was, he was the greatest acting teacher and the greatest teacher of the arts. Absolutely.
Here's a question that, that all mimes struggle with. We know that mime is not a mainstream art form in the United States,
Right.
if anywhere
Yeah.
for that matter. I mean, other places more so than here, but more
Yeah.
recognized more. But what do you feel the shortcomings of mime are, or the shortcomings of the culture that the mime lives in, that keeps it from being more of a mainstream? It's definitely not on the same frame as modern dance or contemporary dance was, or ballet or classical music, or, acting in movies, even television, like mime has not been recognized on the same levels as those art forms in our country. I'm not going to speak for other countries, but why do you think that is, in a sense? Or why do more people not know about the American Mime Theater, for example? Why, that we know about, Martha Graham Company and all that, but why not American Mime Theater? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I start the initial answer?
Yeah.
Over a lifetime, I have discovered that, and it's pretty obvious, people love music. People will fill the music. The audiences are full. And the reason is because you don't need to be involved. You can close your eyes and the music will wash over you. And that's not to put music down, by the way. It's a universal vibration.
Yeah.
Okay. The minute you get, for example, to dance and much worse theater, dance, you actually need to pay attention. There's movement going on. And again, not quite as personal. So you get more people that like dance. Now you get to theater. Theater demands of you. You need to be there. That's important. You need to pay attention. And then you get to mime. They don't even use words, man. Mime demands the most attention.
You're right.
We've all lived long enough. People don't have attention spans. That's just a given in our lifetime. We understand it's gotten less and less. So it's really difficult for mime, even in great storytelling mime, to become so compelling that a mass audience resonates to it.
Yeah, that's so ironic, because originally around the campfire, people were probably doing a form of mime in terms of, that it's like the source of everything.
Yes, you don't need words. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hello, but
yeah, it's
that's
very,
my take on it.
Yeah, it demands a lot of creative participation by the audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
And by the practitioners, having taught for decades movement and for actors and mime, it's hard. I was always the movement guy or the devised theater guy in drama programs, but I never really taught my heavy duty mime because I knew the students couldn't hang with it. In the end, you had to be a monk.
Yeah.
You had to be a warrior, and I knew that there wasn't enough time, and I would lose them because they just didn't have the discipline or even understand why it was important, So,
Absolutely.
yeah. That's interesting. What do you guys think about legacy? Like your legacy, American Mime Theater legacy, is that important, or are we all fleeting? As Shakespeare would say, we're just fleeting here and we're going to be leaving and soon. And what difference does it make? I mean, how do you feel about all that?
Well, I have to admit, I grapple with that Shakespearean dilemma, the human dilemma of the ego. Indeed, I mean, I think we all do. I think my mother was a magnificent artist and she died young, and there are a couple of paintings left.
Yeah.
And I think about this all the time. I think most of us, if we are truthful with ourselves, I have to keep tweaking my psyche, to tell you the truth, to stay in meaning and to stay in the connection to the divine, to tell you the truth, to know that, it's what's left, in eternity, that it's still there. But I got to talk myself down often.
So you're saying, you're looking to the future, or what?
Well, I'm looking I'm looking to, I just want to know somewhere in my heart, I've been so prolific. I hope that I have moved people and that it still resounds after I'm dead and gone. I hope. I have an ego. What can I tell you? Or maybe it is my soul that wants to have made meaning for the world.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got a little different take on this than Erica does. Um, it seems like since I was late teens that I've devoted myself to this live experience. And even coming from sports, and James, you and I shared that earlier on.
Yeah.
That's live. That's in the moment. And theater always represented, whether it was dance or theater, it's here and now. If you drop the glass and it breaks, it's actually you dropped the glass and it broke, and you have to take in that immediacy of what just happened, and build a set, do whatever needs to be done, and the play closes, the piece closes, and everything is broken down, and I stand before the stage and it's empty. It's empty. There's nothing there anymore. The only thing that's there is a particular memory, and the memory of the people that came and shared that experience. I cannot ask really for very much more than that. Although, interestingly, over the last few years, I've written a couple of books. I wrote a children's story. I wrote this thing about my traumatic industry, which I really hope people read who are in pain, because it actually really is very actually valuable.
Is that the Shattered project that I
Yes, Shattered. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, one of the questions was, how do we adapt to our age, our aging bodies? Like that, which has something to do with legacy and so forth.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm, so I said to you, we've been very prolific, and I believe in the here and now also, but I also believe in simultaneous time and eternity. So, I'm very Shakespearean in my thinking. So very
All your gestures are doing this. You're not doing. You're not doing this.
Actually, I believe in being mythic, which is where one foot is on the earth and the other is in the sky. I do, but I just turned 70. And I have a lot of illnesses, and I just recently, 3.5 months ago, broke my back.
Okay.
So I'm physically really limited. And although I always thought that I would wind up like Frida Kahlo, always doing something creative, for the first time in my life, there's been a lot of entropy. And I don't like it. Now, it's been about 3.5 months since I hurt myself so badly. All the creativity kind of went away. And with it, a bit of my life force. I don't recommend it. At the same time, hell, I know it's part of the process of my living and dying and all of that. And I'm starting to do some spiritual rituals, and I'm starting to write morning pages, and it's coming back. It's coming back. I have an art show right now, present. Spent 2.5 years writing a book. But I teetered back and forth between these existential dilemmas. I do.
How about you, Mark? You it sounds like you've done a project based on physical setbacks or mental. I mean, how does one adapt as an aging artist to these challenges?
I also am not physically able to do certain things.
So how do we adapt? How do we keep going?
Well, the way that I handled it, and the way that I've tried to express in this book, is that, and it's very much, again, Eric and I are very, very similar in this way, is that there is a greater truth in all of this, and that's one of the things that art represents, but also the spirit represents that as well, because this universe, or multiplicity of universes, whether it's string theory or all of this stuff is so enormous and so incomprehensible to us. We only see a limited range of light. We only hear a limited range of sound. There's so much more that it's not a matter of, oh, I want to hear more. It's a matter of, in the adaptation process of saying, okay, I'm not capable of doing this particular thing the way I remember doing it.
Right.
Mm.
So now it's again stepping into the unknown. What is there that is actually able to be done, but is just as vital? I mean, I love companies where you have, women who only have one leg, for crying out loud. And people in wheelchairs. I mean, Bill T. Jones does that all the time with using people. That's a beautiful representation of where I am now.
No, that's great thought. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's where you are now and how you use it. It will have a luminous quality in the end.
Yes.
Okay, last question.
What does Keith have to say about
unless
this
you have a
answer, though, legacy?
What's that?
What does Keith have to say about the legacy?
Well, we had talked about that. Unless you want to address it again.
No,
I talked about it in my interview.
Do you have a last question?
Which
Keith?
I did.
have one that I want to ask.
love.
Do you have any,
Yes.
Do you have anything, Keith, you want to address with them? Before I give my final question.
They've given me a lot of food for that. I'm going to be thinking about this all night.
Yeah.
I knew I chose.
No, that's you.
Yeah.
That's Keith Berger. Is this? I think the cloud is actually all this electric energy. This dark cloud is actually the electric energy of lightning and so forth forming itself. So.
Yeah, I'll say one thing to Erica concerning something she said. I noticed with myself that when I get into a period, I mean, this is just in my later years where I get into a period where I am not producing anything. I've noticed the moment I truly accept this stillness of nothing happening,
Of course.
I move out of it. But to really accept that, I know you probably already know this, but to really accept that moment is extremely hard, but you do get better at it. And it is a thing that I find you just accept it and you just be still.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's like when in doubt, don't move and then something will happen.
Don't move. Yeah.
Well, you'll move through that into your need for yang when that arrives.
Right. Yeah.
No, but Keith, that's great. That's truth. I mean, when you don't know what's going on, or you don't feel, just be still, and then something will always spring out of the nothing.
Sometimes you think you're still, but you're not. That's the point.
True. That's the other challenge. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
I'll start with Erica.
Yeah.
Just a very short answer, maybe one word.
Oh.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Whole.
Great. Mark, what do you want to be when you grow up?
This is so funny that you are asking this question. I have been asking this question for the last year. And I find it so funny that at my age, I'm going, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I went, stop. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What do I want to be when I grow up? And honestly, I really want to be an artist. I just want to be an artist when I grow up. It feels so fulfilling to me. I found that I actually love it. I actually do. So
Yes.
I want to be that when I grow up.
Yeah, I've only admitted to myself that I'm, if someone asks me, what do you do? I say, I'm a mime.
Ah,
And you see people's eyes light up. For years, I would not say that. I would say I was an actor who moved, or I was a physical comedian or something.
Right.
Now I say I'm a mime, and people go like, what?
I have to tell you what I say when people ask me who I am. Literally, I say, I am multitudes.
Very good.
I mean, absolutely.
Very good.
That is
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that has been a wonderful session on the Mime Radio Show with Keith Berger, Mark Maslin, and Erica. Pronounce your name again.
Sarzan Barillo.
Sazarin Barilla. Thank you very much, guys. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show podcast. This was the final episode of Season 3, but please look out for more information about Season 4. Thank you for your support. be sure to like and subscribe.